Preface: A quiet spark. There is a moment, always fleeting, just before the factory comes to life. A hush, a breath held between the last stars fading from the sky and the first hiss of steam warming the iron belly of the world. In that stillness, I have stood alone many times, hand resting on the window frame, watching the city prepare to wake. I did not begin as a master of machines. I was born in the shadow of looms and coal fires, in a house that always smelled faintly of turpentine and thread. My father was a tailor, quiet, gentle-fingered, and though his hands bore more needle pricks than coins, he carried himself with the dignity of a man who made things well. From him, I learned the value of detail, of work done carefully and without witness. But it was the city, with its hunger and promise, that taught me ambition. The story that follows is not of heroes, nor of saints. It is a story built with soot in the lungs and smoke in the blood. A story of iron forged not only in fire, but in silence. It is a recollection of empire and ash, of the trembling balance between mercy and power. You will meet Mr. Scarrow, a man who has long walked the line between loyalty and survival. You will meet the ones who labor beneath the great wheels, the Margarets and Ellises of the world, whose names were never written in the ledgers, but whose lives bore the full weight of my success. And you will meet the city itself, breathing, growing, demanding. I have built factories tall enough to darken the sun. I have hosted gentlemen in gilded halls while children toiled in dye-stained rooms I seldom saw. And through it all, I have tried, perhaps too late, to understand what it means to hold power in one hand and a conscience in the other. This book is not an apology, though there is sorrow in every page. It is not a justification, though I have whispered those to myself more times than I can count. It is, instead, a quiet ledger. A record of what was built, and what it cost. If you find in these pages a question that cannot be answered, good. That means you are listening. Nathaniel Harrow. Chapter 1, The Sound of Inheritance. There are mornings when I wake before the bells ring in the valley, when the light creeps through the silk curtains like a memory I haven't yet learned to forget. The air in my room is still, touched faintly with rose water from the glass bowl that rests beneath the window. I sit in silence then, listening, not to the birds or the wind, but to the memory of a different sound, the slow, relentless churn of the looms. A rhythm carved into my bones long before I had rooms like this to wake in. I was not born into this comfort. No, my childhood was stitched together from threadbare coats, broken spools, and the sharp tang of vinegar used to clean the dye vats. My father kept a modest tailoring shop 2 streets south of Millstone Lane, a place small enough to warm with a single coal stove and quiet enough for me to hear every sigh he let slip when the day's business went badly, which was often. He had no head for negotiation, no patience for debtors. Still, he believed in hands. In labor. In the quiet dignity of making something yourself. He died with his hands stained blue from indigo and his pockets empty. I buried him in the pauper's field, and the next morning, I walked north and asked for work. The first factory floor I stepped onto smelled of oil and rust and heat. The clatter of the machines was overwhelming, like standing inside a storm made of teeth. But I remember the feeling, raw, powerful, terrifying. I was just a boy with ink on his collar, but I knew then, this was the new cathedral. And I would build my altar here. That was 34 years ago. Now, the estate stretches across 3 acres, with a garden designed by a man whose name I cannot pronounce and a library lined with first editions bound in green morocco. The roses climb obediently along the stone walls, blooming fat and red in the morning dew. My fountain murmurs pleasantly, fed by a copper pipe that runs from a spring beneath the hillside. Every inch of this place whispers success, but I know better. It shouts it, boldly, the way only the newly rich dare to. Because beneath every book, every rose, every pane of imported glass, there is still the beat of that old machine. And the men who run it. I was walking the northern path of the garden this morning, gloves in hand, the dew soaking through the fine leather of my shoes, when I saw Mr. Scarrow approach. He walks like he did as a boy, straight-backed, jaw forward, hands behind his coat. I plucked a rose without thinking, rolled the stem between my fingers. Scarrow paused at the edge of the gravel. "Sir," he said, with a short nod. "Good morning, Scarrow." He waited until I gestured for him to speak. "There's unrest at Millstone No. 2. 3 women refused the spindle line last night. Others have begun speaking with them." I glanced down at the rose. A single thorn had pricked my finger. A bead of blood, almost elegant, bloomed at the surface. "And why?" "They claim poor ventilation," he said. "Say the steam has worsened. That the air's become damp and close." "Is it not?" I asked, quietly. Scarrow's jaw stiffened. "The steam's no different than it was a year ago. Or 10. They've taken to listening to the street speakers in the alleys. Union talk. Reform pamphlets. I warned them once. Tomorrow I'll let them go." I said nothing. The wind had picked up faintly, tugging at the cuffs of my shirt. In the distance, across the hedge, the city smoked as always, its chimneys rising like prayer towers, casting long shadows over every roof and street. "No violence?" I asked. "Not yet. But the younger ones are restless." I studied him. His coat was stained at the hem with oil, and he carried the familiar scent of machine grease and burnt cotton, a scent I had worn once myself. He stood still, a man made not of flesh but of duty. I nodded slowly. "Hold action for now. I'll visit the floor myself this week." He blinked, once. "Sir? I'd like to see it." "Very well." He turned and left without another word, his boots clicking sharp against the gravel path. I stood a while longer, holding the rose. The blood had begun to dry, a dull red mark against the white of my glove. I pressed the bloom to my nose, sweet, but not strong. A cultivated scent, elegant, distant from the wild. Like so much of this life I now lived. The machines would be waking soon, and the bells would ring across the valley. I turned toward the house, toward the silver laid out for breakfast, the telegrams awaiting signature, the plans for another expansion. But as I walked, I carried the scent of oil with me, and the memory of heat and hunger, still alive beneath the perfume of rose water. Because no matter how far I walked from that first factory floor, the sound of inheritance always followed. Chapter 2, Velvet and Ash. They arrived just after 7, in carriages polished to mirrored black, horses snorting against the bridles bit as footmen leapt to open the doors. The evening air was warm with the scent of late summer, the grass still soft underfoot from morning rain. From the drawing room windows, I watched the first few guests disembark, ladies in silks the color of old wine, gentlemen buttoned into formality and power. I had spent the better part of the afternoon preparing. The fountain had been freshly scrubbed, the hydrangeas trimmed into elegant roundness. I'd ordered the orchestra to play Debussy beside the reflecting pool and instructed the cook to spare no extravagance, fig tartlets, smoked salmon with horseradish cream, duck in port reduction, and claret enough to drown the whole of Parliament. I threw these parties twice a year, out of habit more than desire. It was important to be seen. To remind the city, and myself, that I had not merely survived the age of smoke, I had mastered it. By 8:30, the lawn glowed with the soft light of gas lamps strung between marble posts. Laughter mingled with music and the clinking of cut crystal. The mayor stood by the trellises near the back, quoting Latin to a young woman who clearly wished to be elsewhere. Across the lawn, I spotted Lord Averley, who had once called me that upstart Coleman at a dinner in Kensington, now shaking my hand and praising the ingenuity of our new weaving frames. I smiled politely through it all, speaking just enough, drinking just little enough, nodding with practiced gravity at talk of tariffs and shipping monopolies. But beneath the velvet and crystal, something uneasy churned. Earlier that day, I had read a paper smuggled in from the slums, a printed tract by a group calling themselves the Iron Mouth. It was badly written, impassioned, and utterly without subtlety. But it carried weight. They called for stoppages. For union. For the halting of machines until the men were heard and fed. Their ink was thick with fury. And it smelled, unmistakably, of revolution. Mr. Scarrow found me near the reflecting pool, glass of claret untouched in my hand. His boots were polished, his coat unwrinkled. But there was no mistaking the mill in his eyes. "Sir," he said in a voice low enough not to draw attention. "You should know. There was another flare-up near the No. 4 dye vats." "How bad?" I asked, without looking at him. "They broke the lever arm off one of the steamer controls. No injuries, but the vat scalded through a dozen lengths of thread. Intentional, I think." I turned to him, slowly. "Do we know who?" "One of the newer boys. Name of Ellis. 16, maybe. Quick fingers." He ran before we could question him. I looked out across the garden. The music had shifted to a waltz. A dozen finely dressed couples swirled across the trimmed lawn, their silk hems brushing the grass like whispered promises. "And the others?" I asked. "Watching," he said. Not helping, but not stopping him either. A beat passed between us, heavy as iron. "Find Ellis," I said. Quietly. "I want to speak to him before the constables do." Scarrow gave the faintest nod, then faded into the crowd like smoke. The claret in my hand had grown warm. I placed it on a marble pedestal and stepped away from the pool. Lady Pembroke intercepted me near the veranda. She wore violet, and her diamonds sparkled like frost. "Mr. Harrow," she said, her voice silken. "The progress of your industry is the talk of the opera box. They say you'll be shipping to the Americas next season." "That is the hope," I replied. She leaned in. "Just be careful not to fly too close to the sun. I hear the workers have teeth now. And teeth, when hungry, bite." She smiled and floated away, leaving me with the scent of lavender and something like dread. I watched her go, then turned toward the edge of the lawn where the light gave way to shadow. There, beyond the garden's border, the city rose, tall chimneys, black roofs, windows glowing faint with candlelight. The factories loomed in the distance, their breath slow and steady, exhaling steam like sleeping beasts. I had built my fortune on their breath. But I could feel it now, the weight of it pressing back against me. The ash was no longer content to settle in the corners. It wanted air. It wanted light. A child's laughter broke through the music, pure, unthinking. It belonged to the daughter of one of the shipping magnates, running with a ribbon trailing from her hand. She had never seen the inside of a mill. Never known the taste of soot or the stutter of a broken loom. And yet, her world spun on its gears. I stood there for a long time, the music rising behind me, the factories breathing beyond. Tomorrow, the machines would start again. But tonight, I listened to the silence between them. Chapter 3, Between Gears and Ghosts. It had rained before dawn. Not a gentle mist, but a summer downpour, enough to wash the soot from the rooftops and leave the cobbled streets shining like slate. I left the estate early, wrapped in a dark overcoat, the collar pulled high, boots scuffed on purpose. It had been years since I walked these streets as a man unseen. The city was already stirring by the time I reached Millstone No. 2. The chimneys stretched skyward like monuments, their bricks soaked and blackened, rain clinging to the iron girders like dew. The air held that familiar smell, wet ash, grease, coal smoke. It clung to my coat, to the inside of my lungs, and to something deeper, memory. Scarrow met me by the side gate, dressed for function in a wool coat and mud-caked boots. His hat sat low on his forehead. He looked me up and down once, expression unreadable. "You're early," he said. "So are you." He pushed open the iron gate, and we stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the heat. Though the morning air outside still clung to the chill of rain, in here it was warm, wet, oppressive. The machines hadn't been running long, but already the air pulsed with rhythm and purpose. Steam hissed from the pipes overhead, and the looms, like beasts roused from slumber, chattered and groaned. We moved through the spinning room first, row upon row of women hunched over thread wheels, fingers working with ghostly speed. Most were no older than 20. A few looked up as we passed. Some did not. One girl, no taller than my shoulder, brushed her arm across her cheek, leaving a streak of dark oil on pale skin. Her shoes were thin, her blouse too large. I paused. How long has she worked here? Scarrow glanced toward her. Margaret. Came in March. 14, maybe 15. One of the quick ones. She looks ill. She keeps up. The words struck like iron. I said nothing. We walked on. In the dye house, the air grew thicker, sour with lye and hot dye, the steam curling in blue-tinted plumes. Men moved in silence, muscles slick with sweat, lifting wet cloth from vats the color of wine and blood. The floor was wet and slick beneath our boots. I remembered this smell from boyhood, the sting of it in the nose, the burn in the eyes. My father's coat had smelled like this when he came home late, sleeves stained dark from washing out color with his bare hands. We turned a corner near the loading dock and found the door to the old boiler room. Inside, the brick walls wept with condensation. The overhead pipes rattled like bones in a tin casket. Ellis worked here, Scarrow said quietly. The boy who broke the dye lever. I nodded. The room was empty now, silent except for the occasional drip of water from a rusted valve. Why did he do it? I asked. Scarrow didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked across the room and placed his hand on the old inspection ladder, fingers tightening briefly. He said his brother died here. 2 years ago. Caught his arm in a spooler. Bled out on the floor before anyone could stop the wheel. I closed my eyes for a moment. You didn't mention that. I don't mention everything, he said, voice low. You hired me to keep the gears turning. Not to tell you who's lost a brother. He turned and faced me then. They're angry, Harrow. Not just tired. Not just poor. Angry. And more of them come every week. We stood in silence, the ghost of the machine's heartbeat still echoing through the floor. After a while, I left him and walked back alone through the spinning floor. The machines roared on, unbothered by thought or consequence. The girls kept working, eyes fixed forward, hands too fast to blur. One dropped a bobbin. She bent to retrieve it, and I caught a glimpse of her back, ribs too sharp under fabric too thin. No one noticed me. I was just another man in a coat, boots marked by the same dust as theirs. But in my pocket rested a gold pocket watch worth more than their month's wages. I felt the weight of it like a stone. Back outside, the rain had returned, gentle this time, beating on my sleeves as I lit a cigarette beneath the awning. The mills loomed behind me, breathing smoke and steam into a sky that never quite cleared. Scarrow joined me moments later. We've posted 2 men at each gate, he said. If Ellis comes back, we'll know. And if he doesn't? Then he's another ghost in the gears. I nodded, took a long drag, and exhaled slowly. Across the square, the city moved like a tide, workers heading in, others stumbling out, the gutters catching more than just water. I thought of Margaret. Of Ellis. Of the boy who bled out beneath a machine that still ran. We'll give them ventilation, I said. Scarrow turned his head. Sir? New venting shafts. Replace the ceiling fans. Open the floor grates. He studied me. That'll cost. Yes, I said. So does silence. We stood there a long while, not speaking. The rain fell softly, hissing against the steam vents and washing the soot from the stones, if only for a moment. Tomorrow, the machines would run again. But tonight, the ghost said names. Chapter 4, The Shape of Smoke. 10 years have passed since that day on the spinning floor. 10 winters of profit, 10 springs of negotiation, 10 summers of uneasy calm. And in that time, the city has changed, as cities always do when the wheels of industry run faster than their people can catch up. Now, from my study window, I watch those wheels still turning. I see the long procession of smoke rising into the morning sky, curling into shapes the wind quickly forgets. The skyline is taller now, glass, iron, steel, all born of the labor that hums through the brick lungs of my mills. But it is not the same hum I remember. It is sharper now, tighter. As though the gears themselves have begun to protest. My study has grown colder, despite the fire crackling in the grate. Age has stiffened my fingers, and the ink from my pen runs slower on the page. Still, I write every morning, as I always have. This habit has become my form of prayer, each word a confession, though I know no priest will read them. Mr. Scarrow still works for me. He has grown grayer, more brittle, like old iron left too long in rain. He speaks even less now, and when he does, his voice is tempered by something new, an uncertainty that didn't used to be there. He no longer reports with the steel certainty of youth. Instead, his words are measured, often ending in unfinished thoughts. The world has shifted beneath us both, and I suspect he feels it more keenly than I. Just last week, he informed me that 2 more looms had been sabotaged at the No. 3 mill. The new unions, the ones the House reluctantly legalized 5 years ago, had threatened a walkout unless demands were met: shorter hours, cleaner quarters, proper compensation for injuries. Things I might have once dismissed with the stroke of a pen. But I did not dismiss them. I listened. Not just to the words, but to the pauses between them. To the weariness in Scarrow's voice. To the quiet rage in the workers' petitions. I approved the repairs. I promised to review wages. I even walked the mill floor again, though the dust now caught more deeply in my chest than it used to. They didn't look at me the same. Some not at all. Others stared too long, their eyes full of something I could not name. Not hatred, but not trust. I wondered if they knew who I had been, if the story still passed from hand to calloused hand: Harrow the tailor's son, Harrow the coalman, Harrow the empire. Now, in the quiet of my house, I turn to the hearth where the fire burns low and golden. Beside it stands a wooden trunk, old, battered, smelling faintly of mothballs and dye. Inside it, wrapped in a cotton cloth, lies a coat. My father's coat. Frayed at the sleeves, buttons mismatched, the inside pocket stained with decades-old ink. I unfold it sometimes, when no one is near. I press the cloth between my fingers. I remember the sound of his shears snipping through wool, the way he would hum under his breath as he stitched late into the night. That coat held the warmth of a man who had nothing. Who made with his hands, who bent beneath the weight of the world and never asked why. He never lived to see what I built from those ashes. But sometimes, I wonder if he'd call it building at all, or simply burning with more style. Out the window, the clouds hang low over the city. The rain is coming again. The street lamps flicker on one by one as night settles in, and the last of the carts roll through the iron gates, laden with wool, flax, and smoke. I wonder what becomes of a city built on breath like this. Breath that smells of iron, blood, and ink. I wonder what becomes of a man who fed it with his own. There's a tap at the door, soft, practiced. Scarrow steps in without waiting. They've approved the amendments, he says. 12 hours a day. Sick days. Ventilation standards. And the men? Some satisfied. Others want more. They always will. I nod. He turns to leave but stops. You ever think of selling? He asks. It's a strange question, coming from him. I meet his eyes. Every day. He says nothing more and closes the door behind him. I lean back in my chair, the leather creaking softly, the fire's warmth barely reaching my knees. I take a thread from the coat and roll it between my fingers. It snaps easily, brittle with time. Outside, the mills breathe on. The city pulses beneath a sky choked in gray. But inside, in this moment, I am neither Titan nor tailor's son. I am simply a man who wonders whether smoke can bear the weight of all we've made it carry. Tomorrow, I'll meet with the board. I'll sign the contracts. I'll review the charts. But tonight, I watch the smoke take shape and wonder whether it remembers me at all.